Billy, obviously, you don't have to tell us the details of what was said after the game, but as bad as that second half looked against the Knicks, this looked even worse the entire game, especially defensively. A lot of blow-bys, a lot of confusion, a lot of guys looking at each other, pointing fingers at each other. What's going on exactly? What did you tell them after the game, and how kind of embarrassed are you with this performance?
Yeah, I mean, I'm disappointed. On a positive side, I thought we, coming out of the two New York games with the limited time we had going to this one, did some really good things offensively with the way we moved and shared the basketball. I thought that was a positive tonight. The bottom line is, Joe, we're not escaping competition, okay? And we need to compete a whole lot better on the defensive end of the floor. And that's five guys being connected. I think some of maybe the dialogue, however you want to finger pointing guys, is I think guys trying to hold each other accountable to doing things at a higher level. And, I can switch to zone, I can switch to different pick and roll coverages, but if the compete level is not high enough collectively as a group out there, it doesn't make a difference. Now, obviously they made some shots tonight, but I would, unlike the Knick game where I thought we contested really well, we gave up two things. We gave up the rim, and I talked a lot about our defense being built to protect the rim, and then we also gave up threes. So we have got to collectively, on a possession, compete at a much, much higher level, because I think it doesn't make a difference what you do defensively. You play zone, you want to trap, you want to be in drop. It doesn't make a difference if it's not executed with great effort and intensity and focus and concentration. And there's times we do it, but clearly we do not do it at a high, tonight we didn't do it enough at a high enough level. The disappointing part to me is we've shown being a top 10 defensive team.
Right.
That's been pretty characteristic. But, and listen, Edwards and Russell, terrific offensive players. I'm not taking anything away from them or the team, the way they performed. But I also feel like we contributed to that.
Is there anybody in there that, player-wise, that gave you an explanation of what they think is going on out there? Or there obviously seems to be something missing defensively, some kind of component where they just are not digging in.
I think that a lot of times when you talk, you got to back it up. That's how I look at it. So we can have all the conversations we want back in the locker room, and obviously I hold that place very, very sacred. I don't think it's my place to share things, but it doesn't make a difference what's talked about back there, because I think that when you do talk like that, or you do say, okay, then you got to be able to back it up in terms of following through, on those things. So, like I said, I think there's a good group of guys, but, when you line up and play, the beauty of it is it doesn't make a difference what happened yesterday, 2 weeks ago. You are not escaping the moment of the physicality and what you got to do. And to me, our compete level on the defensive end collectively was not good and not up to where it has been and it needs to be. And that's the disappointing part, because I think when you see a group of guys be able to do things at a high enough level and then not be able to sustain it, or there's this inconsistency part. Yeah, we've got to. If we want to be any good, we're going to have to confront the fact that you're not escaping this. You got to line up. You got to line up and physically put your nose, your body, your spirit, your soul in front of people. It put your body in plays, like we did. We blockouts, loose balls, like all those things, the physical confrontation of a game, you're not escaping. You're not. And I'm not saying that every possession we did not do it, but we didn't clearly do it enough.
Billy, I was going to ask you a technical question about pick and roll, but you sound like you don't, the way you're talking about competing, how concerning is that to be at this point of the season where you're still talking about something as basic as competing? And DeMar said the same thing after Friday's game. Yeah,
listen, I always look as a team as kind of a living, breathing, or it's a unit, right? It's five guys out there, whoever's out there at that time, the five guys, right? When we get the mentality that I feel like I'm doing it for him, and I'm going to do it for him, and I'm going to do it for him, and I'm not letting the guy I'm out there with down. So there was a few times that pick and roll coverage with Russell, just from watching film, he is really, really good in when you're just back. sitting back. He snakes it. He gets rolls. He does a lot of different crafty things. He gets fouled. So we were up a lot. Well, when you're up a lot, you're going to be vulnerable in the middle of the floor, which we were. And I thought we were very, very late in the first half. There was not quick enough rotations to the next guy. I think there was opportunities at the rim that we didn't meet the physical confrontation of that. We switched out of that some coming out of halftime to back up a little bit further in terms of how the floor was balanced. We ended up going zone for some possessions, and that's my point, is if you're not doing anything at a competitively high enough a level, then it really doesn't make a difference what you're in. And as much as from the bench I'm trying to help those guys, there is certainly got to be a collective competitive spirit that you've got to be able to line up and put your nose in place and physically battle. And I didn't think that we clearly and nearly did that as at the level you have to do to be successful.
Billy, you called a timeout with 3:03 left on a corner three that was made, and the game was already out of hand and decided. Then was that just to point out a defensive breakdown, or?
No, I mean I think at that point it went to maybe it was 16 at that time, I think maybe is what it got to on that three. I think it was a 13-point game. Yeah. I tried to get a quick hoop just to see if we can maybe get something early and quick and maybe somehow get back in the game and give them a chance. But clearly, after that, they came down and scored, and I think it maybe went to 18 after that. But I think it was if we were able to cut it down with 3 minutes to go, who knows? It was just I had one extra timeout to use, and I was going to lose it, and I figured, what, let's just try something.
And then on a broader point, that mindset you talked about before about you're doing it for the guy next to you, and you're, defensively you're doing it for the guy next to you. That was on display when you beat Milwaukee right before Thanksgiving. That was as good of a defensive effort as you guys have had all season. Where do you think that has gone? Because on that night, guys were making plays for each other. They were sacrificing their bodies for each other. Where do you think that's gone?
Yeah, I don't know. You'd probably have to ask those guys that. I'm not really sure. Not to get into, it was interesting. I had this was a few years ago. I had a really, really interesting conversation with Richard Sherman. And I was talking to him about Seattle's defense and just those guys. And he was just talking about, I know every single one of those guys, wives, parents, brothers, we are connected. And he talked a lot about that kind of that connectivity, and I believe in it 1,000%. And it's hard to be a great anything as a group unless you're going to really, really, really do it for the guy next to you. That's really what it comes down to, is we got to do it for each other, and we got to help. Everybody's job's really hard. Vooch has got a really hard job being up. He's going to probably during the court, I think last year Vooch defended more pick and rolls than any other center in the league. That's a hard job. Well, you got to be there behind him to support him and know that, hey, listen, I'm going to be here. You're going to take care of me, and then someone's going to take care of the next guy and the next guy, and you got to be able to do that. And we just didn't do it at all tonight, in my opinion, like we have. And to your point, I don't know what the difference is there. To me, I think we've got to get out of the mindset of worrying about scoring and how's it going offensively and realize the ball scores. And if the ball's moved and passed, you got to be able to, whoever scores, scores. We scored 144 points against Dallas, and I know it was a really tough back-to-back for them, and I know Doncic didn't play, but the way we played, we had 7 or 8 guys in double figures, and tonight, I like the way we played offensively. But the ball's got to find the open man, and when shots are going in or not going in, or they're making shots, you have to be able to keep coming back and competing.
Last quick one for me. Well, you didn't play Drummond tonight. What was the reason?
Yeah, I think it's like we talked about a little bit earlier. Javante, I thought when I came in here was going to be about 50-50. One thing we haven't really taken a whole lot of hard look at, Andre, when he went down with the shoulder injury, I think in the San Antonio game, he had missed a little bit of time, so he played a little bit smaller. And some of those small ball numbers, although it was a small sample size, wasn't bad. And, I wanted to try to see what a small lineup would look like. I didn't know what Gobert's situation was going to be tonight. But I just think it's another way rotationally and trying to look at our roster of what's some different things that we can do to what you guys, how can I inject some energy into the group? And I thought playing maybe small with Javonte and DJ at times last year was really, really good for us. Goran out there, maybe that gives us a little bit of pop, But I think that was my feeling, was to inject some energy into it.
Billy, this is 2 straight games. You guys have been down 25, 30 points. And when I look at your team during timeouts, I'm not seeing a lot of fire. I'm not seeing guys getting on each other.
Nope.
Is that happening, or is that something that you're waiting on these guys to kind of step up and call each other out?
I think there is some. You probably need to talk to them about that. I don't, like there's times where I'm out of the huddle, so I'm not necessarily in it, so I don't hear it. I do think, I try to give those guys a little bit of space before I go in there at halftime and speak to them. But I do think there is a point of, I do think there's conversations going on. But I do know and believe to what you're talking about in terms of that's competition.
I'm not saying it.
That's competition to me. Like, the harder it gets, that's competition. I actually thought the one group I thought did a really nice job is Goran, I think, felt awful about the pass at the end of the third quarter. And you know what? I think we got down by 16. DeMar came back. We got a flagrant one. I think he maybe made 1 or 2 free throws. We got the ball. We got it down to 10 real quick. You know what I mean? And there was really, really good talk. But all of a sudden, when things are not going as well, like – in any high-level competitive thing, you have to handle adversity, and you have to embrace adversity, and you have to lean into adversity. And adversity does one of 2 things. It either brings you really, really close together, or it divides you. That's really what happens. And, I think the harder things get, the harder you got to lean on each other and be there for each other, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yep.